I'm Anne and welcome back to my channel. This video will probably be slightly shorter than most of mine because I'm just talking about one book and I don't have that many thoughts to say about it, but we'll see when I start rambling. I really ramble. Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. This is a classic I'm pretty sure most people haven't heard of. So this review will be slightly different because I'm going to break it down into different parts than I usually do. So the first one, I'm going to talk about Alan Paton because I think he's a really interesting author and I had never heard of him before. When I found this book, I actually found it at the Goodwill for like $1.50 or $2, and I just picked it up out of curiosity because I saw it was set in South Africa and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting to read about. So I got it, and boy, was I surprised how good it was. So the way I'm going to break up this review is I'm going to talk a little bit about Alan Paton, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the general plot with as few spoilers as possible. Then I'm going to talk about my likes and then my dislikes. So Alan Paton was born in 1903 in the colony of Natal, I believe it is called. It was a British colony in Africa that existed from like the early 1800s all the way to 1910. So he lived in South Africa his entire life. So obviously he knew it pretty well. He was the son of a civil servant though, so he was more of, I'm not going to say like high class, but he wasn't very low class. There were a lot of like new immigrants that were coming into Africa that were really impoverished. So he was not necessarily one of them. Civil servants had pretty good jobs. They would be what we would think of as like middle class at the time. So he definitely wasn't poor, but he wasn't rich. And throughout his life, he became very anti-apartheid. So for those who have been living under a rock and don't know anything about the apartheid in South Africa, it was pretty much this segregation movement where blacks were segregated from whites. Apartheid was actually put in place in 1948, which would have been a year before this book was written. So it's definitely set around a changing time period in South African history. And it came to an end in, well, 1990. 1994 was when it officially ended, which is the year I was born, so that's cool. But it's very sad because he was very anti-apartheid. He fought against it, and he wrote his books with very anti-apartheid messages in them, as you can definitely see from this particular book. But what's really sad is he died in 1988, so if he would have lived like just a few years longer, he would have seen apartheid end. So it's kind of sad that he fought against this his entire life, and he didn't live quite long enough to see it. But I'm sure books like these probably made a big difference in changing public opinion against apartheid, so that's cool. Now, enough about the author. I'm going to get to the book. So the book follows this Zulu pastor, Stephen Khumalo, and his son Absalom, as well as this array of other characters. So the book starts off with Khumalo, the pastor, who I'm just going to call Khumalo because that's what he's called through most of the book. He gets a message from his son, who is in Johannesburg or around it, to come and see him. So Khumalo goes and things happen. He finds out his son is marrying this woman who's been married many times before and she's pregnant. He also finds out that his son actually is in prison for the murder of a white man. And we learn more about that as the story continues. Let's get into my likes first. Khumalo is an amazing protagonist because it is like we are seeing the world of Johannesburg through his eyes. So he comes from a very small town in South Africa. So when he comes to Johannesburg, he hasn't really been there before. So he experiences all these different ideas and he meets these unique people that kind of take him through different places, some bad people, some good people. And as he tries to track down his son because he misses him several times, he goes to like a boarding house where he asks, oh, my son was staying here. And they're like, yeah, but he moved out like a month ago. And then he goes to the next spot. So that's like almost the first half of the book. And so it's all about getting to know this world and seeing the experiences of the average person, both black and white, in South Africa during that time. And it is brilliantly done. The second thing is there is this theme of hope, even though there are so many moments in this book where You were like, this is dark. I'll just insert a short spoiler here. And as long as this like spoiler thing is up, I'll put in the timestamps as well. You know this is a spoiler. So what happens is the man that Khumalo's son kills, it was actually a man fighting to end apartheid. He was an advocate for Black agency, in a sense, to give Blacks more rights in South Africa that they weren't having. So it's really ironic that what actually happens is Absalom, the son of Khumalo, is breaking into this house, and they think just a simple servant is at home, so they knock him over the head. But as it turns out, this white man is also there, and he comes out, and Absalom has a gun and shoots him. And he claims, you know, he was surprised. He didn't know he was there. But obviously, you're still breaking into the house to steal their property. So it's not like you can really justify Absalom. So in a sense, he is the bad guy in this. But is he also a victim of society? Because he was so impoverished, he needed to provide for his pregnant girlfriend at the time. So he just thought, well, this will be the last theft I do to make enough money to survive. But also you're like, on a moral standpoint, yes, I understand that you're struggling to survive, but that does not mean you go steal from people. And especially don't shoot them and kill them. So in the end, Absalom is executed for killing, of course. But there is also this commentary on if Absalom had been a white man who had killed a black man, odds were he would not have been executed. So there's also that commentary going on, which was really interesting. But in the end, it's really cool because two sons die, the white man and the black man. You have Khumalo, this Zulu pastor, who is the main character, but then you also have the father of the white man. And in the end of the book, they actually become friends and start working together. And it's very sweet to see this essence of hope, even in a world that is torn asunder by hatred. And I think that's what we need, whether in American society or just any society, is trying to come together, not trying to break us apart, because let's face it, maybe we have some differences, but it is in differences that we become stronger. I've learned that with reading is that the more I read about different types of experiences, the more I am more open to different thoughts and different understandings of the world. And that's why I love history so much, because you understand that through time, everyone has had the same struggles. They've just been slightly different variations. So it's really interesting to learn about. But I loved it in the end where you have this idea of this father of this white man and the father of the black man who killed him getting along and becoming friends and saying our race, our backgrounds because of our sons cannot pull us asunder, because we both realize that the other one is a good person. And so we want to be around them. And I loved that message so much in the end. Okay, but now getting out of spoilers, I'm going to just say I really enjoyed the book. Saying that, let's get to like some of the dislikes I had, and they're very few and far between. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, and the main reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because of this one single issue. There are no quotation marks in this entire book. I'm going to show you this because you see these little lines? That's lines of dialogue. So, as you can probably tell, you have regular prose, and then dialogue is differentiated not by quotation marks, but by this line before they start speaking. I started to read this book in physical form, and I just had trouble getting into it because I'm like, you're not writing it right, okay? You need quotation marks. And then I switched over to audiobook, and I loved it like 10 times better. For a traditional reader, you receive certain signals when you see those quotation marks. And oftentimes you skim in between, like she said quietly. You just skim that, and then you go onto the quotation marks because that's where your eyes follow, because you learned. But in this book, you didn't have that. You kind of just had regular prose, and then you had like this line, and then they start talking, and you're like, that's not right grammar. And I understand that probably feels a little bit petty for some of you watching, but for me, I love quotation marks, I love grammar, and I really dislike when authors use improper grammar and or improper formatting for books. It's just a pet peeve of mine. It's why I could never read House of Leaves, because it is filled with that sort of stuff, playing around with format and things like that, and I just don't like it. So that downgraded this book from a 5-star to a 4-star, but because the book was so good, I couldn't give it lower. I really adored this story and I highly recommend it. So I could gush about this book more, but I think I'm going to leave that as is. I have a very longer video planned for next week. We'll see if I can get it out next week, or it might be the week after that, but I am working on a longer video that takes more work because I have to read like 5 books for it. So we will see how that goes. But have you ever heard of this book or read it? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday at 6 p.m. Thanks so much for watching and have a great week. I will see you in the next one. Bye.